Hello everybody and welcome back to Oxygen Not Included. I have some pretty terrible news. My cat was kidnapped yesterday. It turns out that if you are a YouTube content creator making Oxygen Not Included content and you get over 2,000 subscribers, Klei sends a couple goons to your house and they kidnap what you love most and won't return it until you make a video on Airlock designs. And this is unfortunate for two reasons. The first reason is that it means I have to have a very difficult conversation with my girlfriend later tonight about why she wasn't the one who was kidnapped. But also it means I need to make a video on Airlock designs. And the problem with that is that everybody has made one because Klei has gotten around, but also everyone has made the same one because they're basically 7 designs that are used everywhere. They're the best designs, they do the job well, they function great, they're on varying scales of difficulty in order to make, and there really isn't much of a use in terms, from a very utilitarian standpoint, to make anything but these 7 basic designs. Nonetheless, I have to do what I have to do, and so we're going to show off those 7 basic designs today. I'm also going to show off 2 special designs that aren't particularly more functional than any of the designs that I'm about to show you, but do look a little bit cooler and maybe are just interesting enough to throw in your base. So let's start off with the creme de la creme of the 7 basic designs, and that is the stacked liquid lock. The idea here is pretty simple, and the build is pretty simple. We're going to take 3 different liquids. We're going to take a little pit like this. We're going to toss in 2 tiles of the densest liquid, in this case crude oil, because that's something that you're going to have access to in a lot of your maps. We're going to fill up the next one with the next densest liquid, that is petroleum in this instance. And then on the very top, we're going to put the lightest of the 3 liquids, in this case, water. Now, it's important that you don't use something like polluted water in this build, because polluted water will off-gas into polluted oxygen, which means that your lock could fail once all of that evaporates. Also means that it's kind of defeating the purpose of an airlock if some gas of a certain type is escaping into an area. Like if you want to keep an area as a vacuum, having something that's creating gas next to that vacuum isn't really part of the equation. So do make sure that you're not using polluted water, but with the variety of things that we have access to nowadays, whether it is ethanol, salt water, brine, all the different liquids that we have, you can actually do a lot of crazy things with this setup, but it's all going to be the same idea. You're going to take a bottle emptier and you're going to empty out these liquids in order into their appropriate spots, right? So you set up a bottle emptier, you empty out some crude oil, then you set up a bottle emptier and you empty out the petroleum onto this area, and then you empty out the water. And usually the trick to building these things is that you build a couple doors next to them. That way all of the overflow from this area, you can mop it up after you've closed the door and basically clean up this whole area. Don't have a bunch of water lying on the ground, because if you give a mop order right next to this liquid lock, you'll mop up the lock itself. So be careful not to do that. Also be careful in terms of preventing spills from getting this area, or just handle the spills very carefully. Don't mop away your liquid lock. But the thing works pretty well, and this is going to be the gold standard against which most locks, let's not what happened here, spawn a duplicate. There we go. Joshua, do you have any crazy traits I need to consider here? Like, are you flatulent? No, you're fine. Okay, great. Joshua's going to go and grab these blossom seeds over here. And the nice thing about this is duplicates basically teleport whenever they jump. So even though Joshua here is jumping through a bunch of liquid, he's not getting any sort of debuff. He doesn't have a sopping wet debuff increasing his stress or anything like that. From his perspective, even though he just passed through a bunch of liquid, he didn't get wetted in the slightest. So this is the absolute best. It works with vacuums. It works with all sorts of gases. You can use a bunch of materials that are really easy to find. There's virtually no technology required in making this. And there's no stress debuff when your duplicates use this lock. Even though they're passing straight through water or liquid or whatever else you're putting here, they aren't having any negative effects as a result. This is also fairly stable because as duplicates jump from one area to another, again, they're basically teleporting, right? So they're not picking up any of these debuffs. They're also, very importantly, not farting, not exhaling, not creating any gases that might break this barrier that you've created. So this is the best that you can possibly get. They aren't, again, that hard to construct. In one of my old Let's Plays, I constructed 3 of these as part of a Drecker ranch. That might be a good example if you're still trying to figure out how exactly you would build these. But basically just bottle emptiers, empty this out, mop up the excess, make sure not to mop up on the tiles right next to the liquid lock, and you're good to go. Next up, we have the Visco gel lock. Now, this Visco gel lock could be repeated in the exact same way as this one to make sure that duplicates jump across, but it also is something that you can build with just these 2 tiles right here. So this has a very unique property in that you don't need multiple different liquids to stack together and make this thing work. You have this basically the space material that does the job for you. The disadvantage of the way that we've set this up here is that we will get the soggy feet / sopping wet debuff as we travel through here, right? He's gone through this liquid and it's fully submerged him, and now we see that he's stressed and he's kicking water off of himself and so on and so forth. But the basic same idea applies here, and it's just that Visco gel is a little bit easier of a liquid to work with. Again, we could set it up exactly like this and have the same effect. But this is a space material. This is something you're not going to be able to get till later in the game, and so usually it's not something that's used very early on, but it's pretty cool looking, right? This purple and all the sort of, right? Like, I like this pattern that they have. And it is really easy to set up once you've got this going. Really, you can just have a pipe full of this Visco gel and just break a couple pipes and you're good to go. No long process with a bottle emptier. Not many worries either about temperature as well. You can stick 2 Visco gel locks right next to each other and have a vacuum in the middle pretty easily. So easier to build, requires space materials though, so in that sense not easier to build, but does the same function, right? And in this case, we've done it just too high to show that you do get the sopping wet debuff if they're just running straight through here. Next up, we have what is commonly referred to as a corner lock, but I haven't built it fully as a corner lock, hopefully so that way we can see the disadvantage of not building it fully as a corner lock. Let's go ahead and spawn a duplicate here. Trivaldo. Hopefully Trivaldo is actually flatulent. No, okay. But we might see it as he does this task here. The basic idea is that this one little bit of water that we have lying on here is fully blocking any gases from transferring between these areas. It's pretty crazy, but no gas can occupy a tile in which there is water. Now, the disadvantage of doing it not as a corner lock, but as this just sort of droplet lock, is that if duplicates fart or exhale when they're right on top of this lock, they might push the water out, and that could break your lock. So this is not the most stable of locks. Typically, what people would do to make the lock a little bit more stable is they would have a wall like this to make it an actual corner that's up here, right? And they might have 2 corner locks as well to kind of help this process along. So they might end up having a system that looks like this with just this corner and this corner filled with water to try and maintain the system and be able to replace the system if there's any sort of accident that breaks this liquid lock. Usually they're fairly stable. It's a little bit trickier when you have flatulent dupes because they're much more likely to break this lock as they're traveling through it. They'll fart as opposed to just exhaling when they're on this exact tile and create the issue. Something to keep in mind, a little bit less robust, but the big advantage of these is that they only create the soggy feet debuff. If we click on Trivaldo here, he's got soggy feet, but he's not sopping wet because he's only traveling through a little bit of liquid right here. That's the big advantage of this, helps keep your stress down. We have the more robust version of it down here, which is the full-on liquid lock. We fill this entire area here with water, and the disadvantage, of course, of this is that they will now get a sopping wet debuff. When Catalina goes through here, she's going to be fully submerged in the liquid, and that's going to create a much larger stress problem for them, right? Sopping wet is a pretty big issue in a lot of your bases. So if you're playing on the hardest stress difficulty, as we are in our current Let's Play, this is kind of a tricky system to set up. You're really taxing your duplicates when it comes to their stress, but it is very robust. It's very easy to set these up as full vacuums. Like this area right here could be vacuum, and you could just have a second liquid lock right here without adding to the stress too much because it would just refresh the duration, right, of the sopping wet debuff. So these are very effective, very easy to set up. You don't need just some exact small amount of liquid. You can just have a bottle emptier and leave it alone for a while, and you'll come back and it'll be done. That sort of thing works all the time. We have a couple variations, though, on this sort of full liquid lock to show you. Same idea, but instead of using water, which has this disadvantage of giving the sopping wet debuff, we have one that uses hydrogen and one that uses carbon dioxide. Both more or less have the same idea. Let's go ahead and spawn a couple duplicates down here. The hydrogen is the lightest gas in the game, right? Hydrogen is the lightest gas in the game, and no gas really is going to be able to displace it very easily from this upper spot right here because it takes priority on holding these slots. Even though this chlorine that we've put over here only has 1 atmosphere of pressure, and the oxygen that we put over here has 2 atmospheres of pressure. The pressure in this room is twice as high as the pressure in this room. Now, there are some tricks, of course, that if this was completely vacuum, the system wouldn't work, right? But, likewise, this system wouldn't work if it was completely vacuum. But you have pretty good maintenance of this lock. It's fairly robust, and it doesn't have any stress disadvantages. You're not getting soggy feet. You're not getting sopping wet debuffs. It just has the restriction that you can't have a vacuum on the other side. We do, it looks like, have some flatulent duplicates. Catalina has filled this vacuumed area with natural gas. Otto, it looks like, has also released some natural gas. The main thing to consider also when using gases in the system is that the system can act a little bit awkwardly when you are using hydrogen on the other side of your hydrogen lock or carbon dioxide on the other side of your carbon dioxide lock. You might get scenarios where the carbon dioxide kind of bubbles up a little bit, or the hydrogen kind of pushes out a little bit from the system, if that's the gas that you're trying to contain on the other side. That typically isn't the biggest deal in the world, but just keep in mind that is one of the things you might need to consider with these alternatives. Again, big advantage, you don't have these major stress debuffs from using this system. They are a little bit harder to set up in a sense, because liquids are very easy for your duplicants to transport, but gases might be a little bit harder. But at the same time, you could just allow gases to naturally transfer to these areas and get a natural lock that way. So a lot of bases are going to be able to make these without any effort at all if the base is set up in a particular way. So those are the 7 basic locks that are used pretty much everywhere and range from fully effective, does everything that you want, to does most of the things you want with various issues in terms of stress debuffs and whatnot. I forgot the 7th actually. The 7th is basically an organization of mechanized airlocks as best as you can. Sorry, let me go ahead and run this one. This is not a great system, I have to say, using these mechanized airlocks, but the basic idea is that you're just going to use a bunch of mechanized airlocks in an effort to restrict the gas flow from the systems, right? So this door closes, it limits how much gas we're getting into here. A lot of this gas will be destroyed by the closure of this mechanized airlock, but we're still seeing some gas transfer from the system. This is just sort of the muddle through it method, right? These are much more perfect locks, and it's just a question of how robust they are. This is a very imperfect lock, but if you don't have time to set up a bunch of carbon dioxide or hydrogen or water or stack a bunch of liquids or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if you're just trying to go really fast and try and limit things, just having a bunch of mechanized airlocks in a row sometimes works decently well at this process. Finally, we have the 2 interesting designs that I would like to show you today. Let's go ahead and get to them. This one's going to take a little bit of explanation because this one is an automated system that's going to be fairly complex. Luckily, May has gone to sleep, so we're going to have some time to show this off. Let's go to automation here, automation wire. What we're using here is a memory toggle connected to these weight plates and to the Atmos sensors in these rooms. And the output from that is controlling these duplicate checkpoints. Whenever you're using one of these automated systems, an important thing to keep in mind is that you cannot control duplicate movement by locking these mechanized airlock doors. Locking airlock doors will break pathing for the duplicates. If there's a task on this other side that they're trying to get to, they will forget that task exists if you lock this door, because their pathfinding will say, I just can't reach it, it's not something relevant to me. So whenever you have a system that relies upon locking or unlocking doors, it's fine if duplicates don't need to carry anything across those doors, don't need to reach some task on the other side of that door, or right? If they're just working in that area, all their tasks are being generated, and then finally they leave to go do something, that can work out, but it's really finicky. You really want to rely upon these duplicate checkpoints to stop duplicates as they move from one area to another, and you never want to lock these doors as part of your solution. So again, rely on duplicate checkpoints, and this is going to be a system that is a 2-way system. You can have duplicates coming from here, you can have duplicates coming from here. It's going to provide a seal either way. So here we have May coming in. She steps on the weight plate. That turns off these duplicate checkpoints. She then goes and stops at this duplicate checkpoint, and the memory toggle will only be toggled back on once this room has vacuumed itself out. So here she is sitting, waiting, and then once this room is a perfect vacuum, then she can proceed. All these duplicate checkpoints will turn back on, and she'll be allowed to go to her task. She still can see the task. She still has in her head store Blossom Seed as her errand. This has not been deleted from her memory. Right, she'll still go and do it. Do keep in mind, though, she's having to hold her breath for a pretty long time through this. So one of the tricks you usually do with these sort of automated systems as well is you create a atmosuit checkpoint. And the duplicates that are passing through this airlock will then go and make sure that they have an atmosuit on and are able to breathe as they go through here. So she didn't quite make it all the way, I suppose because she has sore back and therefore doesn't have enough athletics to quite get through here. Maybe that's it. In any case, there are some downsides definitely to the system, but the basic idea can be shown right here. We have the memory toggle controlling when duplicates leave and enter, so they can only pass through the checkpoint once these rooms have vacuumed out, right? By stepping on here, they trigger this process where this room has to be vacuumed out before they can continue. So she's going to wait here until she can get over, and then it's going to be the same thing from the other direction. Now, of course, if you have a vacuum on the other side, if this is connecting to, say, space or some sort of exposed area, you don't need half of the system, right? She can just stop and wait here, and then once this room is vacuumed out, she can go back, right? And then you don't have to worry about vacuuming out this area here But there's also no harm into setting this system up when you have a vacuum on the other side, because then this Atmos sensor will just immediately toggle and say, you're free to go back through. So I showed the full system, right, and it applies to both scenarios. Gas-wise, we're just taking the gases that enter this room. Because they came from this room, we're just pumping them right back out. You do need to make sure that this gas vent has the proper outlet, right, that the pressure isn't so high that this can't pump. Otherwise, you run into some issues, of course. And you do want to have an atmosphere checkpoint to make this thing work. But once again, here's all the automation. It's pretty simple. Memory toggle, here's the output of the memory toggle. It goes to these duplicate checkpoints. The memory toggle is turned on by stepping on these plates. These plates are set to below 200 kilograms. The other end of the memory toggle is connected to these Atmos sensors through a NOT gate, right? So we're making sure that the room is vacuumed out before this thing says you're good to go. And that's basically it. That's all the automation. You, of course, need power to the system. You need to power the checkpoints. You need to power the gas pumps. But you don't really need to power these doors. In fact, I don't think the system works if you power these doors. So just leave them unpowered and that'll be fine. And it looks pretty neat, I have to say. It provides a good thermal barrier as well, because this room is constantly being vacuumed out and all the gas that escapes into here is being put back over to here. So you're going to have very little heat transfer across this. Like the situations in which both these rooms have a little bit of gas to support some sort of heat transfer is going to be fairly small, right? So it's good in that sense. You don't have to worry about melting point like you do with the stacked liquids up here. Looks like Joshua has managed to spill out some of our petroleum over here. You don't have to worry about melting point or anything like that in this system. And yeah, it's not the most practical thing, again, because it does have these major downsides. Oh, it's not that he leaked the petroleum, it's that he is leaking. This is polluted water. Okay, thank you, Joshua. But it looks nice, right? It looks cool. And this is really the first automated system I've ever seen that really efficiently handles this issue, because a lot of the others rely upon locking these doors. And whenever that happens, you break the errands that these duplicates are trying to perform, and they will drop whatever it is they're trying to carry. If we had these doors lock as opposed to these checkpoints turn off, she would drop the blossom seeds, never be able to carry them over here. Right now, she's never able to carry them over here, but just because she doesn't have enough oxygen to work with. But in theory, right, if she had an Atmos suit, or if this area was, say, polluted oxygen, she'd be able to complete this task. So there's one of the special ones right here. We have another special one right here. This is like a waterfall type of setup. Let's go ahead and spawn in a duplicate to show it working. Off you go, Auto. What we're doing here is we have a little mini liquid pump here at the bottom, and it's pumping up water into this little area right here, and that's creating this constant waterfall that is creating an airlock between these areas. It's kind of like having the stacked liquid lock from up here, but in a waterfall form. Now, this isn't really practical in the sense you could just have the stacked liquid lock, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But it does have a lot of the benefits of the stacked liquid lock, and it looks cool. You have this waterfall going on. That's actually kind of a neat effect. And one of the nice things, too, is that it has, because we have this little gap right here, the same sort of stress benefits as the stacked liquid lock. Otto is not passing through this liquid per se, he's teleporting from this tile to this tile as he jumps, right? You might imagine him just kind of jumping behind this waterfall or something. And here I put a little bit of chlorine in the middle as a sort of disinfectant, so if Otto has some germs on him, this chlorine will help remove it as he goes through, just a little bit. I like that sort of effect that you can have sort of a decontamination area inside your airlock. But a little waterfall like this is pretty neat. Again, plumbing, pretty simple. We just have a mini pump pumping up here. I have kind of primed the system with a little bit of salt water to make sure that this is just sort of dripping slowly off the side. So we're controlling things through that means. But this is a pretty simple to set up solution, and I think it looks pretty neat. So there you have it. The 7 basic solutions: stack liquid locks, Visco gel locks, corner locks, liquid locks, hydrogen locks, CO2 locks, just throwing a bunch of mechanized airlocks together and putting up with a little bit of gas dilution plus gas leaking out. Automated solutions that rely upon duplicate checkpoints, and then kind of more interesting liquid solutions like this that are relying on waterfalls or really cool, neat effects to provide your airlock. And that's it for this video. Hopefully I get my cat back. Hopefully this is good enough for Klei. And hopefully even the people who have watched a million videos on airlocks, because there are a million videos out there, and I guarantee you all of them just cover these same basic locks. Hopefully, even those people who have seen those videos will get some nice ideas from this on how to set up automated systems or how to set up different liquid lock systems. Anyways, that's it for our episode, and I'll see you guys next time.